I got a really good feeling about tonight's show. Colin and Jesse and I were just in the control room 5 minutes ago. We were just playing some scenarios out, right? And we were talking about how the presidential debate's coming up Thursday. So, like, do we need to move our show around? Short answer, no. We're going to have our show at the same time. And the presidential debate, the folks over at CNN have agreed to hold the debate after our show Thursday night. So, good on them. But anyway, forget about that. Then we started talking about how that would apply to college football. What kind of world would it be? Let's just fantasy book this, to use a wrestling term. What kind of world would it be if we had a college football commissioner, but it wasn't just an anointed position? What if that was a publicly elected position? What if you had to run for college football commissioner? I would, of course, throw my hat in the ring, and I would find all sorts of super PAC backing. So I would be well funded, and I could get myself on a stage with like one of these country club types, one of these corporate types. I want it. I need it. We got to make it happen. We're jam-packed. We're high atop a very, very steamy downtown Nashville, Tennessee on this Sunday night, June 23rd, the year of our Lord 2024. This show could go 2 hours tonight. It's not going to, but if I wanted it to, we are so loaded tonight. I could easily turn this into like a telethon. We've got what-ifs. I always love doing this time of year. The biggest what-ifs, the hinge points, if you will, of the college football season coming up. I got some of them tonight, got many more of them coming throughout the month. There's some stuff going on with Alabama right now. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to bury the lead, or I don't want to lead with the lead, but we're going to talk about it. Some tweets being deleted, some statements being redacted, so we're going to talk about that tonight. There's also I'm talking about wild stuff being thrown out there, staying in that state, about Hugh Freeze. I will react to that. Brent Venables has got a new contract at Oklahoma, so you know what? Well, golf clap. We're always for guys getting theirs. Was it premature? Some people had some thoughts. I do have some thoughts on that. Unpopular takes tonight. Bold predictions tonight. We got a whole bunch to talk about. They're watching us in, Coweta, Oklahoma. Maybe Coweta, Georgia as well. They're watching us in Atlanta, Georgia. Hartford, Connecticut, where there was a tornado warning earlier today. New Hampshire, Connecticut. I can't ever say that I've storm chased up there. First time for everything, though. Abilene, Texas is tuned in as well. Before this show goes off the air tonight, my promise to you hear that? Paper pop, so you know it's serious. Huge gas station recruiting wars update. The biggest update that we have had so far. We have finalists, and we have several edits being submitted. So, some Chally of supremacy will be given out on tonight's show, no doubt. Okay, let's dive into the show. Like I said, I got to keep a half-decent pace tonight, or we could go 2 hours. Immunity. So, some of the biggest what-ifs in college football this year. Always love to do these around June and July. Now, I'm just going to hit you with the first one, and I'm going to go all the way down to Coral Gables. Forget about Miami winning anything. That's not really what what-ifs are about. I mean, what if Miami wins? Well, if they win, they win. What if this quarterback they got out of the transfer portal, what if Cam Ward ends up being an all-ACC quarterback? So, first thought on my mind is he better be. He better be, because I look at these big-time quarterback moves in the portal kind of like I would look at free agency moves in the NFL, because, I mean, let's be real, that's what they are. I love the game. You love the game. I'm sure Cam Ward loves the game. Most of these moves aren't being made strictly for love of the game. So I want a return on my investment if I'm Miami. That's the long and short of it. And even though Mario probably won't say that at a press conference, that coaching staff feels the same way. So he better play at that caliber if he's healthy. If he does, and I got no reason to believe he won't this year, well, then you start to have a little domino effect. Because if he does that, Miami could win the ACC. If he does that, you could, of course, have like a Heisman conversation around him. But also, if that's happening, like if they're getting that caliber quarterback play, and you think about how improved they should be defensively, just as a team, again, they should continue year 1 to year 2 to year 3 improvement. You've got the perception that changes about the staff, namely the head coach down there, who my inbox is still telling me can recruit but can't win big games and can't, fill in the blank this and that and this and that. Well, if Miami's like a 9 seed in the playoff this year and they end up going to the conference title game or winning the conference title game, it's going to be make or break on that quarterback position. Remember this time last year, a lot of folks had high hopes for Tyler Van Dyke. Didn't pan out. Shot themselves in the foot, specifically at that position in big moments. Turnovers, fumbles, terrible. So they erased that. They got a higher caliber talent at the position, better team around him. If they have that caliber play, well, it's not hard to figure out what that team could be capable of. And I think it would be a shock to the senses of a lot of people in college football if you were to see Miami and the kind of conversations that we haven't seen him in a while. Now, my next what if, we go a little ways up north. Longtime rival of Miami, especially in yesteryear. What if Notre Dame goes undefeated in the regular season? What if that happens? Well, the first thing that would happen is people would call their schedule weak because Notre Dame could never just legitimately go undefeated, according to some. And then outside of how soft the schedule was, we would get Marcus Freeman in more real terms, just being coronated as the man in South Bend. Think about how that would go down. So you had Brian Kelly there, who was rattling off really good seasons, and then he moves on, and they had the guy. They had who they wanted. They had Marcus Freeman there, and it was one of those situations where the fan base looked around, and it was kind of odd because at the time, Brian Kelly appears to have been poached away by LSU, and the nation looks and says, oh, that sucks for Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman, good defensive coordinator, but boy, it's going to be a learning curve for him, isn't it? Well, if he ends up being to the nation what he already is to Notre Dame folks already love him, equal to, if not more than the guy they had previously. I would say no knock on Brian Kelly. They mean it as a knock on Brian Kelly. So be that as it may, all of their feelings about Marcus Freeman would be validated if this happened. Now, here's the more nuts and bolts from a national perspective. How good were they? If they go undefeated, like how good are they? Are we talking about Notre Dame being the number 1 or number 2 seed? Because you know what the Notre Dame caveat is in this whole expanded playoff thing. Notre Dame can't have a first-round bye. The trade-off is they don't play in a conference title game. So the first thing we would get to do is we would get to see all the drama that would surround Notre Dame kicking their feet up on conference title Saturday while all the other big boys who are ranked around them have to go play and risk loss and risk injury. So we would get that. I would participate in it. And then we would have Notre Dame on the flip side realizing, well, they don't realize it, but they would be reminded, you have to play. Even if you're the best team in the country, even if you're literally ranked number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, they're going to get all the buys, but you can't be number 1 actually in the playoff seeding, so you have to go play in the first round. And then we would have the conversation about whether or not that's going to force them to join a conference. So all that is the answer to the what if. But then there's this other thing. It's way in the back of my mind. You tell me if you think like this. When you say that whole what if with Notre Dame, what if they go undefeated? Well, obviously that means they make the playoff. I think a lot of people's minds, maybe mine included, defaults to Notre Dame making the playoff being their ceiling. Is that their ceiling? Like, in other words, you think about teams like Notre Dame, and if they make the playoff, it's a success. Now, you'd never say that about Georgia. With Georgia, with Ohio State, they need to win the whole thing for it to be a success. Would Notre Dame be a good enough team to be in that conversation? Could they legitimately be viewed as not just a playoff entrant, but a national championship contender? And here's another what if for you. Now, this one, like with that one, we're going to have to wait till the end of the year. Follow me on this. A lot of headlines you don't like about college football right now. I'm with you, but there's a whole lot more that we should love. And one of them is, we get Texas versus Texas A&M back this year. Here's the what if. What if Texas at Texas A&M over-delivers? Because this is going to be one of the premier rivalries again in college football. Now, it always was. It's just because college football is handled in one of the most stupid ways possible, they stopped playing on the field for a little while and robbed us of what should have been a yearly tradition. Well, it's back this year. These people hate each other. No other way to put it. There's beautiful kinds of hatred in this world, especially in the sporting world. Meemaw used to always tell me, hatred on a football field and hatred in real life, 2 different things, Joshua. And this kind of hatred is pure, it's unadulterated, it's unfiltered, it's wonderful. At the end of the year, Texas goes to Kyle Field. So it's tough for me to describe what that environment's going to be like. I know a lot of people look forward to the Iron Bowl. You get to look forward to OU Texas in the SEC. You look forward to Ohio State Michigan outside the SEC. I still don't get the sense that the college football public in general has this on their radar yet. But not only should it be on your radar, this may be as intense as any rivalry game that's played this year. And here's what I would draw your mind to. Remember 2 years ago, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was Sark's first year at Texas. They went to Arkansas. You remember this? Texas folks do. Arkansas folks do. They went up to Arkansas. A total nightmare for Texas. Because Arkansas remembers the Southwest Conference days. And Arkansas remembers being sort of the redheaded stepchild, like the only non-Texas school in the Southwest Conference. They remember the hatred. They remember the politics. They remembered all that stuff. And it was bottled up. They hadn't played Texas in quite a while. And Texas went in there, and it was like just a hornet's nest on steroids. I have to believe if that environment was like that for Texas coming in, can you imagine what A&M, what Kyle Field will be like? I don't care if they're 12-0 or 6-6. I don't care what caliber team A&M has this year. It would serve the national purpose better if they were both in playoff contention. But that rivalry being back this year is a huge story, even within the larger story of Texas coming to the SEC. Those are some what-ifs that I've got my eye on this year. That is not an extensive list. I've got like 30 of these things. We could do an entire month's worth of shows just on what-ifs. You hear that? A lot of you are new around here. Anytime you hear the paper pop, that means sit down, shut up respectfully, because something big is about to be said. And it gets no more significant than this. A few months ago, I realized we're on the road all the time. We're going to games all the time. We're going to campi, plural of campus, all the time to talk with coaches. I go storm chasing as a hobby in my free time. There is never a time during the year where I'm not constantly on the road. Like many of you, I travel a lot. So like many of you, I'm at gas stations all the time. And I play no favorites. Well, I used to play a favorite, but they abandoned me out in the cold, so I don't even speak the name of a certain beaver out there. And in turn, I've gone to Racetrack. I've gone to the Quick Trip with a K on the front of it. I've gone to Love's. I've gone to all of them. I've frequented these places. And I thought to myself, what better partner? So, sales department, I don't think we really do that. We'll do it ourselves. And so we started a gas station recruiting war. Some laughed at first. They're not laughing now because now it's very serious. And we have found ourselves in the middle of, Colin, Jesse, I would call this probably the hottest gas station recruiting war that I've ever witnessed, and certainly that we've ever seen in these parts. And we've had meetings. I've had visits. I've gotten to know people at several of these establishments, both on the marketing side, on the product side, on the sales side. It's great. I have a list of finalists, is what I want to announce to you tonight. And Love's has made the final cut. Quick Trip, with a Q, has made the final cut. Racetrack, a name that has flown below the radar, but they have been a mainstay in this thing. They have made the final cut. And Pilot Flying J. That's my final four. So I released that yesterday. That's not the breaking news, but I told you guys I got to get an edit. Hayes Fawcett doesn't work here, so I'm not even sure I'm allowed to take an edit from him. I probably am. But Hayes does all the edits for like all the recruits out there. You see him all the time. I got to have one. This is a high-profile recruitment, okay? I'm not going to play linebacker for anyone this year, but this is big-time recruitment. So I told you, best edit gets a chalice of supremacy. Here's the problem. We got too many of them. So I don't think we can narrow it down. Colin, do you have a few of these, by the way? So Colin's showing you like 2 or 3 of them. There were like 100 of them. There's John Dunn, friend of the program. He submitted one there. I am very, very fond of this one here because I never wear a hoodie, yet somehow, some way, we found a picture of me wearing a hoodie. I think that's from our Penn State trip. Hats on the table there. Someone else had a picture of me pulling into a gas station with 4 different branded gas pumps and a tornado in the rearview mirror. No shortage of quality applicants. So check your inboxes tonight, people. We will be sending multiple chalice of supremacy out because I'm a man of my word. Commitment date right around the corner, and then it will be go time. And I don't ask much from this audience, but I will be asking one thing. You got to get gas. You got to do it. Everyone's got to do it. We will just be looking to redirect our business as a people here at Pate State towards a certain brand because they've made it well worth our while. I will let you know more when I can let you know more. All right, let's continue. As you know, July is different now. Colin, don't include this in the cut when you put it out later. July is different now. If you're new to college football, if you just started following it the last few years, it may seem normal to you that everyone's talking about recruiting in June and July, this time of year. That's not normal. That's not normal. In fact, it used to be a total downtime, not quite a dead period, but kind of a dead period. And you'd get into the football season, and kids would play their senior year in high school, and then they would take a visit or two during the season, but they would have their official visits lined up for like January, and that would be the final stretch to the February National Signing Day. That's the way it worked in the old school. Well, then we had an early signing day instituted, and it broke loose entirely, because then that meant everyone wanted to start doing their official visits in the summer, and they wanted to get it locked up so that they could go ahead and be ready for the early signing day, blah, blah, blah. So now, anyway, long story short, January is like an afterthought, and now all the big-time recruiting moves for the next cycle are happening this time of year. Okay, with that as the backdrop. Now, Colin, here's our endpoint. Kalen DeBoer and Alabama are on fire. Just absolutely on fire, much to the chagrin and amazement of a vast majority of the college football public. And a lot of you didn't think this was going to happen. So I've seen a lot of you already deleting some tweets. I know, because I bookmarked several of them, and they're not there anymore. And I don't think that that's the most classy move on your part, but that's fine. That's fine. I will say that I said at the time, and I'm going to tell you again, I thought there was a lot of false hope out there amongst many people who were just tired of getting their head beat in by Nick Saban in Alabama for the better part of 2 decades. And so they said, well, DeBoer's not going to be able to recruit down here. Oh, it's going to fall way off. And it's kind of like if you got a girl that you like and you find out, oh, she's dating Teddy, and you say, it's not going to work out. You have no guided knowledge to go on. You're just wish casting. I grew up in the South. It never snowed where I grew up, but I wanted it to snow. So I would just say, I think it's going to snow this year. Well, I had nothing to go on. I just hoped. You're hoping it doesn't work out with Regina and Teddy, but you don't know. And a lot of you talked out of the side of your mouth about Kalen DeBoer. He's not going to be able to recruit down here. I've got all the evidence in the world. What's the evidence? Well, he didn't recruit at an elite level at Washington. And well, that's pretty much. Also, I don't think he's been down here. I don't think he's been in the South. So a lot of people wish casted. And there was really not a lot of guided intel to go on there. Well, here we are. We wake up this morning. It is June 23rd. Alabama's got the number 2 class in the country. They just landed Micah DuBose yesterday, I think it was. This high 4-star offensive lineman out of South Alabama. I went out to L.A. last week and watched Keelan Russell, who is, I know our recruiting staff loves when I do this, in my mind, a 5-star caliber quarterback that they've had committed. Well, he won Elite 11 MVP, so he must have been pretty good. And they must have known what they were doing when they flipped him from SMU. So that dude's a monster. So they're going to be set at quarterback with either he or Austin Mack or a combination of them for years to come, I think. They are favored, as of this week, to land 5-star corner Dijon Lee out of Southern California. I would feel safe in saying you can expect some action imminently on Dawson Merritt, who's a 4-star linebacker from the Midwest, Great Plains area, as a matter of fact, Kansas. There are a couple other names that I think, look, they're not done, is what I'm saying. In fact, they're sitting here with the number 2 class, and I think things are going to get better for them. So this is a surprise to a lot of people. I get why it is. We had Kalen DeBoer on the show a couple of months ago. I specifically asked him about recruiting, about how he felt he needed to go about it, what people were saying. Colin, roll it. Here's what he said.
Just looking out, how do you expect recruiting to go? How equipped do you guys feel, and what is your philosophy on that?
Yeah, I don't think you could deny that. Haven't spent a lot of time recruiting at the intense level that is needed to here in the SEC, and so it was important for me to surround myself with guys either who were really familiar with the area, familiar with even the faces that were in the next cycle or two, the 25s, the 26s, so forth, or guys that were just elite recruiters in general. And I think we have a great combination on our staff. I've been very blessed to surround myself with a recruiting staff led by Courtney Morgan, and he did a great job of putting some of those pieces together to fill in the gaps that we felt were necessary to, take care of those areas maybe that we were, wanting to make sure we were on top of here early. And I think it's led to, really good results here. As you said, there's been a lot of visitors to campus, and every time they come, they leave feeling really good about what they saw, what they felt, and it's opened up some doors again that I think at one point were maybe closed. Doesn't mean we get all of those guys, whether it's next year or the year after, but we're back in the game and continue to build those relationships.
So that was about 2 months ago. We were down there all day. I've shared some details from that trip. Not all. We never share all the details. That's what confidence entails. Let me put it to you like this. I talked to everyone in that building I could. Many of them names you wouldn't even know. More names you would know about that. I wanted to know about recruiting. And you would have thought that was a place that had landed a couple of top 3 classes already. You would not have thought it was a first-year staff at Alabama. I mean that because they talked with such certainty and confidence and like a matter-of-factness about what they were about to do. So while other people were doubting them, including people in the Bama fan base, there was never an ounce worth of hesitation or trepidation in their voice when they talked about what Bama recruiting was going to be. Outside the walls, remember we talked about this on this show, outside the walls, folks were echoing a mixture of the chorus of, well, Bama really doesn't have a whole lot of NIL money. It's just that Saban always got the discount on kids. Now, it's funny because the same folks that told me Bama was broke and the NIL would dry up are now telling me Bama's surging because they're dropping bags for kids, which I still can't square. And then the other thing is people told me, well, look at Washington's class. Well, look at how he recruited at Washington. That's the evidence, Josh. If he couldn't get it done there, how's he going to get it done down here? Well, it's kind of like growing up in Missouri and wanting to be a really good surfer. No one wastes their time taking surf lessons in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. The reason is because there are no waves in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. But you can rest assured the folks in San Diego, California do. Or in this world, Kalen DeBoer didn't even attempt some of the things that he can now attempt at Alabama, whether it be an approach or whether it be a hire or whether it be the way that he divides and allocates resources, because he knew it was a wasted effort at Washington. It's not a wasted effort where he is now. Now they can do things they never dreamed about doing. They were never even foolish enough to try it at Washington. But now they got beachfront property. Okay, they're one of the premier destinations in college football, and the only weapon that they really had outside those walls fashioned against them was the unknown. Folks elsewhere in the SEC, they looked around and said, Bama just hired an exceptional game day coaching staff. We got to make sure they don't load up on talent. Problem is they're loading up on talent. And if Alabama recruits like this, Bama's going to be a problem in the SEC for a long time, same way they have been for a long time. Because now you can't sell that they're not going to recruit anymore. And you think I'm speaking ahead of turn here. I'm not. That recruiting's not going to slow down. Like, Bama's recruiting's not going anywhere. If anything, it may uptick again a couple of times. And by the end of July, they'll have their class filled out. And whether they finish number 1 or finish number 4, I said when he got there, dude, as long as they average a top 10 class, I think that will more than be made up for on game day. If they're recruiting in the top 5 consistently at Alabama, Alabama's going to be a nightmare for folks. Because I think Greg Byrne, the AD there, got a step ahead of the curve. And he assessed the landscape of college football, and he said, if talent acquisition today is a lot more transactional, in other words, if you don't have to be such a skilled recruiter, but more of a guy who has deep enough pockets and you can just go buy your class, well, we can do that. Nick Saban or not, we can do that. Let's go get a guy who's going to get the absolute most out of the roster when we get him on campus and who's going to develop and do exactly what he did at Washington. If the cherry on top is you don't take a backseat in talent acquisition either, then Bama's going to be a problem for a long time for a lot of folks. So the biggest weapon was the unknown. That's gone. The whole Bama NIL thing, I think, was always ready to be dispelled. That was a myth to begin with. Just because they didn't have to do it when Saban was there didn't mean they ever couldn't do it. They just didn't need to do it. So Alabama recruiting, man, at this week, this next month, not done seeing the fireworks there. Talking to a lot of folks around the industry today, and there's some surprise. And I think other fan bases around the SEC may be looking at this saying, are you serious? Because you've banked for a long time on just making it until Saban retires. And then once Saban retires, it doesn't matter who they go hire, because there's no way that anybody will match what Nick Saban did. I have no clue what Alabama's going to be under Kalen DeBoer. I know that guy doesn't take a back seat on Saturdays to much of anyone in the sport. And if their recruiting efforts don't take a back seat to much of anyone. You don't need to know a whole heck of a lot about this game to know what premier talent acquisition and premier coaching, once you get them on campus, leads to in this sport. It'll lead to the same thing it's always led to. Academy Sports and Outdoors, one-stop shop for, I would say, 93 or 94% of what I need in my life. Now, some of you live a little bit more extravagantly than me. Some of you actually want more than just a white T-shirt to wear every day. That's cool. They also have you set there. There's a wide array of clothing. I don't know why I chose to focus on clothing with Academy Sports and Outdoors tonight, but it's because they have it. They have sporting goods equipment. They have all sorts of different odds and ends on that front. Bicycle, you want it? They got it. A grill, you want it? They got it. Big League Chew, all flavors and sizes, you want it? They got it. Academy Sports and Outdoors, our longtime partner. Academy Sports and Outdoors also has a fantastic website. You see it right there on the screen, academy.com. So if you don't have one in your backyard, that's fine. You can still make all of your dreams come true. All of your purchases have meaning at Academy, and the reason is because they make the show free for you. That's how we don't have to ask you for money. We don't have to ask you to subscribe to anything except the channel, which is free. It's because we got Academy. We got partners like them on our side, so we thank them always and forever, in the words of Luther Vandross. Biggest questions in college football this year. I got one for you. Does Ohio State really have the best roster in the sport? I didn't say the best team, because a lot more goes into making up a great team than just having a lot of talent. Although, if you don't have a lot of talent, chances are you've put a very low ceiling on how good your team can be. The reason I'm asking this is because there's been a lot of talk long before Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel spoke up, but Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel have both won national championships as head coaches at Ohio State. So when they spoke up recently and said what we're about to play for you, it raised a lot of eyebrows. Roll it, Colin.
But as of now, this is one of the most talented rosters in the last decade, maybe ever. I mean, that's a big statement. They got to play, but you look at the quality of athlete at every position, I've never seen anything like it.
And I don't know if I've ever seen that many great players in that building all at once. Every position, every place you turned. And so Ryan's done a great job. Ohio State has done a great job.
And I've been up there this spring, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. I've been at Georgia. I've been at Texas. I've been at Bama. Like, I've been at the places you would call having the most premier rosters in the sport. There is no place that surpasses what Ryan Day's got on his hands in Columbus, Ohio. Now, notice what I'm not saying here. I didn't even make a prediction about the season, because I know what comes after that. It's a consequence of success. You go and get all the talent, well, naturally, people are going to have really high expectation for you. I do too. It's kind of a double-edged sword in a little bit of a way this year, but they're a top 3 recruiting program in recent history. They loaded up with quality in the portal. They actually didn't go get a ton of kids in the portal, but the ones they got are premier kids. Caleb Downs, for example, plays at Ohio State now. The moment he stepped on campus there, I felt like he may be the best football player on their team, and they are loaded, absolutely loaded. So I know what kind of statement that is, but that's the kind of guy, like Quinshon Judkins, that's the kind of player they added out of the portal. There is a critical mass of returning starters there as well. The guys they got to come back, in fact, when we had Ryan Day on the show, that's the first thing he wanted to talk about. When we were up there in the building all day last month, that was the thing they wanted to talk about. Like, yeah, they'll talk about the portal guys. They'll talk about all that. But they're always quick to say, look at who's returning. That's the nucleus of the team. The nucleus is not from the portal. The nucleus is all these dudes we got returning that, frankly, I don't think this time last year a lot of people would have expected to be on the returning starters list. So is it championship or bust this year? In a way, I think that's insane, but in another way, it makes perfect sense. It's insane, to me at least. It's insane if you say, well, Ryan Day, with all this talent, if he doesn't win a championship, they ought to move on and grab someone else. Well, no, they shouldn't. So that part's insane. But Ohio State is built in such a way this year where if they don't win a national championship, I'd consider the season a failure. I don't think I say that very often. And we're in an expanded playoff era now where theoretically it's even harder. The Big Ten's deeper. So theoretically it's harder. Man, they've got everything They got everything. Now, there's a difference in a really talented roster and a good team because you're only as good as that weakest position unit. So, again, we're going to look at offensive line. I look at offensive line with them personnel-wise. I look at offensive line in a recruiting standpoint, and I think that's the area. If you're circling on Ohio State's depth chart of recruiting with a red Sharpie, if you're circling something, they all know it. Ohio State knows it. It's offensive line. If they fall short this year and there's not devastating injury somewhere, my guess is it's been because of offensive line play again. So if you don't get it done and you acquired all that talent, that's the great catch-22. You don't acquire the talent, people say, 9 wins, that's good. You go get the kind of talent they have, you better win it all. You better win it all. So Urban Meyer thinks it's the best roster he's seen. Jim Tressel thinks it's the best roster he's seen. I will not disagree with them. I think what they're going to put on the field this year is deeper than anything either of those guys put on the field. And they have some really good teams there. Another big question as we approach 2024, the season. Which of the defensive players out there are capable of, being game wreckers? I mean the kind of, Tyrann Mathieu and Ndamukong Suh, big-time defensive names of years past where you had to know where they were every play. I think we got some of them. I think Tennessee's got one in James Pierce, the edge player there. He led the team last year with 9.5 sacks. And I think if we're even close to right about what Tennessee could be offensively this year, they're going to score, meaning teams are going to have to score to keep up with them. They're going to have to throw to keep up with them. And I just picture in my mind, they're on the road against Oklahoma. 2 or 3 big moments. James Pierce off the edge, especially if Tennessee develops depth elsewhere on their defensive front where you can't really key on that guy as much as teams probably think they can. That's the kind of guy where you're watching your highlight shows, your recap shows, and Tennessee won, but you don't know how they won that day. And it's all of a sudden, man, 2 forced fumbles, scoop and score, 3 tackles for loss. It's just James Pierce. He has that kind of ability. I think Harold Perkins at LSU has always had that kind of ability. And for whatever reason, we didn't get to see it last year. That doesn't mean he's lost that capability. They got a new defensive staff down there. How will they use him? There are a lot of questions with LSU this year. A lot of questions on their defense. He's not one. He's an answer. He's the opposite of a question. Use him as much as you possibly can. He should be a game wrecker. LSU, Jesse, what's their over-under? It's 9.5, right? So LSU is expected to be in that 9.5 range. We got a bold prediction later on the show tonight from someone who doesn't think LSU will finish above 500. He is the difference in those kinds of games. Everyone's going to focus on the quarterback position. They should. Everyone's going to focus on them replenishing at wide receiver. Great offensive line, or should be down there. Will the running game be able to carry the mail for him? But absent all that, Harold Perkins should be a game wrecker defensively. Should have been last year. Should be again this year. Abdul Carter at Penn State, edge player there. They just lost a key guy to injury over the past couple of weeks. And so very unclear, whether he'll be back in time for the season remains to be seen on that. But Abdul Carter, if he and Danny Dennis Sutton, for example, if they provide an elite pass rush, then it helps that secondary. A secondary they're confident in, but still a lot of new pieces there. So it helps the secondary. But also, Penn State this year, hey, it'd be great if you get a new OCN and Drew Aller in year 2 just turns the corner and they're scoring several points per game and more than they did last year. And the explosivity rate's way up. But if it's a work in progress, it sure would help to have a cat like this be changing games with non-offensive scoring. That sure would help. Ruben Bain, I think, possesses that ability down at Miami. Defensive end entering year 2, no doubter, as long as he's healthy. Tied for the team lead in sacks as a true freshman. I think you can expect fairly consistent across the board sort of elevation of production for Miami defensively anyway. If that's the case, again, same way we talked about it with Pierce. There's a big difference in being able to turn guys like that loose because offenses can't afford to key on one of them. And so, if you've got that kind of situation with Ruben Bain, really even if you do have it, he's still trouble. But if you have a situation where the rest of your guys around him respond, total game wrecker. And then I mentioned Caleb Downs earlier in the show only because when we're talking about defensive players, I can't talk about game changers and not talk about this guy. Was at Bama last year, at Ohio State this year. I I don't really know what else we can say about him that we haven't already said. I think he could enter the NFL draft right now and be taken fairly high, and especially after this year, even though he still has 2 years left in college. So, yeah, those are some of the defensive players that I would look at. I'm not quite ready to say, defensive Heisman or anything like that, which, by the way, is an award that I've always thought we should have. I know we have best defensive player in the country. I've always thought with the way the Heisman is voted on, should just have an offensive and defensive Heisman, but who listens to me? They're watching us in Sugar Land, Texas, Athens, Ohio, and Pell City, Alabama. Thank you guys so much. Now, I see our numbers. We got a fairly sizable live crowd tonight. Thank you for watching. Just make sure you're subscribed. Ooh, what did I hit on my computer? Just make sure you're subscribed. That's all I ask. If you're listening on pod, make sure you're subscribed. So we had some news. I was just making sure I didn't click the wrong thing. Oklahoma gave Brent Venables a contract extension. A lot of you were vocal about this, surprisingly to me. A lot of you were vocal about this, and so I think it warranted, with the feedback we got, a little bit of conversation on it. Pete Thamel with ESPN the other day broke it. Venables gets a 6-year contract with significant raise. So I think, first off, let's get the details out of the way. He was making about 7 to 7.3 or something like that million per year. This bumps him up to the 8.5 to 8.6 per year range. So little over $1 million per year in increase in salary. And look, Brent Venables has got to put food on the table. It's a tough economy out there, guys. You think you're getting by on just 7.3 million per year anymore? No, this is not 2021. Come on now. So good for Brent Venables. Keeps his head afloat financially. My tongue is squarely in my cheek as I say all this, in case your detector is broken out there. The natural question a lot of you had was, why? Why now? Why now? Why are you giving him an extension? And one of the questions I thought was valid. I always ask this. Anytime a guy's given a contract extension, why did you have to do it? Who were you bidding against? Who was coming after, in this case, Brent Venables? I get all that. And especially in what I call a PJW, a post-Jimbo world, where these big mega extensions are given and then guy doesn't follow through on it and you end up with egg on your face. I'm always hesitant to just blindly endorse these sorts of things. So Brent Venables is 16-10 through his first 2 years at Oklahoma, but more importantly, he was 10-3 last year. They beat Texas last year, and he signed 3 top 10 recruiting classes in a row. So here's one thing I have learned about Oklahoma. I'm not questioning Oklahoma's decision-making when it comes to coaching. I've got a lot of college-age folks and high school folks who listen to this show, but forget about people that young. Let's say you're 25 years old. Congratulations, you made it a quarter century. You've also never known Oklahoma to have head coaching instability in your entire life. It's been the previous millennium since the last time folks in Norman looked around and said, boy, this head coaching situation's really shaky. Lincoln Riley killed it there. Bob Stoops killed it there. And now the same people who were making decisions back then largely are the same people who decided not only to hire Brent Venables, and not only did they not waste any time in going to get Brent Venables, they didn't doubt themselves. He's also shown them enough to where they've decided, yep, he's our guy. Now, here's the thing about that. It could be confusing to you. It could be confusing to me. I'm not that confused by it. But even if I was confused by it, they've got the best vantage point. And their criteria is the only criteria that matters. If this were the University of Florida, if this were Tennessee, if this were a place where they've made some really suspect moves in the past, I wouldn't afford them benefit of the doubt. Oklahoma's nailed it. Like almost in many of our lifetimes, Oklahoma has largely nailed it. So if there's one place where I'm just going to blindly assume they know what they're doing when it comes to hiring, it's Oklahoma. Did you hear the fan base? I always love to use this as a barometer. Whenever a new extension's given out, whenever contractual things are in the blender with a head coach, go ask the fan base. As soon as this went down, the fan base said, absolutely, love it. Gabe Eichard, Teddy out there, like all those folks, the people whose voices I trust in the Oklahoma market, former players included, every one of them. I didn't notice a single person push back on it, publicly or privately. I talked to a few of them privately. So all of them are on board. I'm on board with it. I don't know what more there is to say about that. I mean, Oklahoma, benefit of the doubt. Dude, if you're going to give that to any program out there when it comes to coaching hires and knowing what they're doing with coaches, it's Oklahoma. I did want to mention, look at my notes here, LK Extra. That stands for Late Kick Extra. We recorded it a little bit later last week than normal. I think it dropped on Friday morning. The Late Kick Extra podcast, for those of you unfamiliar, it's a mailbag. I do it once a week. It normally provides some of our best content. It's audio only. It's just in the podcast feed. Never shows up on the YouTube channel. I don't want to speak out of turn here. I thought last week's episode, even though it dropped on a Friday, was one of the best ones we've ever done. So if you had taken it upon yourself to skip over that episode, that is your constitutional right. I would just suggest to you, you may want to go back and check that one out. I thought we had a really good flow in that one, really good questions, and it went very well. So you do with your morning commute tomorrow what you will. That's what I would suggest. We got some unpopular takes to get to here. There's a very good pace on the show right now. Some people said by the time we got to the unpopular takes portion of the show tonight, we already would have been an hour in, and it's only 7:40 here in the Central Time Zone. And I've still got a few things to get to, but don't worry, we're making good time right here. Okay, unpopular take number 1. Eddie hit me and said James Franklin is just not a good football coach. James Franklin is not a good football coach, says Eddie. Let's be clear what Eddie didn't say. Eddie didn't say Franklin's just overrated. He didn't say Franklin's not elite. He didn't say, well, he's not top 5. He just flat out said he's not a good football coach. Just not good, which translates to bad. I think that's the opposite. If you're not good, you're bad. He is one of 5 active FBS head coaches with a 66 or better winning percentage. Pretty decent. Penn State has finished top 12 6 of the last 8 seasons, which means they would have probably been a playoff team 6 of the last 8 seasons. He's won a Big Ten championship. Double-digit wins 5 of the last 7 seasons. 8th best odds to win the whole thing this year. Here's what Meemaw used to always tell me about bad head coaches. She said, Joshua, bad head coaches don't make it over a decade at major programs. And then when I questioned her, she said, you know what else bad head coaches don't do? They don't win 9 games twice at Vanderbilt. And I said, Meemaw, you got a point there. Bad? James Franklin, not a good head coach, a bad head coach. Here's what we always do with James Franklin. It's like a merry-go-round. Same version, different versions of the same game. We always play it on this show. Someone will come and they'll say James Franklin and Penn State are overrated, and then I'll say, what are they rated? And then they won't give me a straight answer. And basically, we'll always boil it down to the fact that James Franklin is the most properly rated head coach in America. He's not in front of anyone he shouldn't be in front of. He is not behind anyone that he should be behind. He's absolutely rated where he should be. There are a million different dynamics in play with every coach. If I had Franklin in here right now and I told him we're off the air, inject this truth serum into your arm, he would explain his existence. He would explain exactly why they are where they are. He would explain exactly what is needed to take the next step. Like, all of it would be laid out. But every coach can do that. We run out of truth serum. We don't even have enough. Also, I don't even think they know the address to the building here. But point being, Franklin is, and Penn State, there is no more properly rated program. So even if you say they're overrated, even if you say he's overrated, I'm going to have pushback for you. But if you tell me he's not good, I don't even think that's so much a matter of opinion. You're just wrong. Like, objectively, you're just wrong on that one. Next up, this is going to be a fun one. Unpopular college football takes. Nate has one. He said, many popular TV analysts don't actually want traditionally bad teams to get better. They want the same teams to be good every year. Now, here's what Nate just did. He made a lot of you nod your head. A lot of you believe this. A lot of you are on board with this. In fact, I'm not even sure how unpopular this is. More I think about it, I think this may be a popular take. I cannot speak for every TV analyst, nor am I going to try to. Here's what I will say. I get accused of this a lot, and it's not true about me. Quite the opposite. I wish all the bad teams would end up spiking. Like, I wish if I looked across the college football landscape, there's no team that was in the ditch for more than 2 or 3 years in a row. Now, somebody has to lose for other teams to win, obviously. And in college football, you're never going to have total equality across the board and resources and whatnot. So, yeah, you're going to have haves and have-nots. But I think sometimes if you watch a broadcast, and let's say, pick Michigan. Let's say you're watching Michigan versus Eastern Michigan or someone like that. Michigan's going to get a whole lot more airtime. The announcers are going to sound a whole lot more excited about talking Michigan. They're going to have more familiarity with Michigan. And that could be taken to mean they're rooting for Michigan or they like Michigan more. It's just human nature. You'd be the same way if you were in their shoes. You may not believe me on that. I experience this sometimes. I'll give you a perfect example. 3 weeks ago, we did a segment on Arizona. One of the worst performing pieces of content we've ever produced on this show. The segment was fine. Delivery was fine. The points were good. Nobody cared. Nobody cared about it when we put it out. And so we have to look around and we have to say, are we really going to dedicate as much time talking Arizona as we do USC? And the answer's just got to be no. Unless we're a charity, the answer's got to be no. Well, you could take that to mean, I don't like Arizona, I want them to lose. Or you could take it to mean, we got a show to run. And we don't answer to the mirror, we answer to the audience. I think broadcasters are the same way. I can't tell you across the board there's not favoritism, because sure there'd be favoritism in case-by-case examples. But the broad strokes allegation of, well, the dude with the microphone's always against me because I'm an Indiana fan, I don't normally buy that. And I think a lot of the evidence is not necessarily evidence that shows what you think it shows. So there are examples to the contrary, but I think by and large, the folks calling the game, I mean, just think about this from a business standpoint. The more good teams you have, the more interest you have in the sport. The more interest you have, the more eyeballs are on the sport. The more eyeballs, the more people see them. The more that people see them, the more their value goes up. Therefore, the bigger their paycheck is. Same way it works with me. Why would I want you to be bad? Why would any color analyst on ESPN2 want you to be bad? I don't know. Maybe case by case, there's an exception, but by and large, I don't know. Let's move on. Exceptional pay. I am not worried at all. We only got 2 segments left. I'm not worried at all. But there were concerns. Like Colin didn't even think he was going to get dinner tonight. And Colin may be able to eat twice at this rate. I need to take a little sip from, let me cover the label, from this nondescript water bottle on a company that just changed their labeling. Wow. It's a shame they don't pay for me to talk about it on here. Oh, wow. This next one, I don't ever do this. I don't ever do what I'm about to do. But I couldn't ignore this. I could not ignore this. So let me set the scene for you. I don't go at anyone in my space. Like, I really don't. I don't play clips and then hate on folks. And I'm not going to do it tonight. I'm going to do it out of love. Some of you know the name SEC Mike. His name's Michael Bratton. I've been on his show before. I know the dude. Wonderful, lovely person. Got a very interesting cousin as well, but lovely person, okay? So the reason I say all that is because it's about to sound like we're trying to dunk on SEC Mike. I'm not trying to do that. Someone brought to my attention the other day that he had made some comments about Hugh Freeze and how Hugh Freeze is going about rebuilding things at Auburn. And he absolutely is rebuilding things at Auburn. And I love the guy. I have never heard 30 seconds of more wrong than I heard. Colin, just roll this. Let them hear it for themselves.
I'm not buying the hype. I don't like the way Hugh Freeze is going about this. I ain't spending $1 million on a quarterback, but you don't have to go to the dollar store to get a quarterback either, Hugh. I think his reputation is overblown because he beat Alabama twice. People forget that he lost to Vanderbilt twice in that same span. I think he is not an elite coach, and I don't like the way he's building it through high school. You could do that 4 or 5 years ago. I think you have to do it in the portal these days. I think there's a good chance heading into next season, Hugh Freeze is on one of the hotter seats in the SEC.
It's tough to listen to. So I'm going to walk through this as calmly as I can. I ain't spending $1 million on a quarterback. but you don't have to go to the dollar store either. Now, I assume this is in reference to the fact that they really didn't go out and drop big money for a quarterback in the portal. I actually thought that was a shrewd and sound approach from Hugh Freeze because I think they knew we're more than a quarterback away. So let's take the money that it would take, and they got folks who know what they're doing on that front behind the scenes at Auburn, I can promise you. And they said, let's go get as many big-time talents as we can, and let's stick with Pate and Thorne. I mean, we don't have poverty at the quarterback position now. We brought in one as a true freshman. Maybe he's the future, or maybe this time next year we go drop a pretty big bag for a quarterback that could make a difference in 2025. 2024, Auburn was not going to be a quarterback away from contending for the SEC, and they knew that. They knew that because of their entry point. They knew that because of what was on the team when they walked in, and it was not a good situation. And this year will still be a little bit of a learning curve, and you're going to have to take some lumps again this year. But also, I will address the other part of that. I'm not spending $1 million on a quarterback. Brother, you better. If you want a big-time quarterback, you better be ready to spend 7 figures on one. So I don't want to get all caught up on the first point because there were like 5 wrong points in this. Next, I think his reputation's overblown because he beat Bama twice. Well, he beat 2014 Bama that went on to win the SEC. He beat 2015 Bama that went on to win the SEC and the whole national title. That's a pretty good reputation builder. Now, he brought up that he lost twice to Vandy. He lost in his first and last seasons to Vandy. And I don't know many coaches out there outside of the literal best in America that don't have those upset blips on the radar screen, especially coaching at a place like Ole Miss. But, dude, absolutely his reputation is based nationally on beating Nick Saban twice. If that's so easy to do, roll out the list of the other ones that have done it. There aren't very many. There aren't very many at all. Third allegation. I don't want to call them allegations. They're just takes. Oh, boy, this one got me now. I poured some Tylenol out for this. I don't like the way he's building it through high school. You could do that 4 or 5 years ago. You have to do it through the portal these days. What? No. We're talking about how Hugh Freeze is not elite, apparently. Could you find me one elite coach, on or off the record, who tells you, yeah, screw high school recruiting, dude. We're doing this thing through the portal. Nobody's doing that. Even Kiffin's not actually doing that. Kiffin's even recruiting out of high school. They're just using the portal a little bit more. By the way, Freeze was 4th in the portal his first year there. So they have used the portal. But they shifted, as they should, as a sound-thinking coaching staff, towards leaning on high school recruiting. You want to know where you want to look to see a failed experiment along the lines of what we're suggesting here? Ask Lincoln Riley how much continuity he felt year 1 to year 2 to now year 3 of leaning on the portal too hard. And ask him what he's trying to do now. Ask him. He was doing an Adam Brenneman sit-down that I thought was really interesting this past week. How much did he talk about the portal versus how much did he talk about high school recruiting? The name of the game has not changed. You want to build a sustained winner, you're going to do it through high school recruiting, and you're going to fill holes, and you're going to put little cherries on top via the transfer portal, and maybe you treat the quarterback position different, maybe you don't, but nobody. Now, I don't care if it's 4 or 5 or 40 or 50 years ago. Nobody's doing it any different today to win championships than they were. The way you pay kids may be changing, and the way that you may be able to leverage that portal here and there may be a little more extreme than transfers in years gone by. There's no elite staff out there. Kirby Smart, DeBoer at Alabama, Ryan Day at Ohio State. You can point out the exceptions. You can point out the players they went and got out of the portal. No one's suggesting Auburn shouldn't do that. Get them on the record and ask them, you ready to forego old school, high school recruiting tactics and just lean on the portal? They'll laugh you out of the building. They'll ask how you got in the building. Also, I think Hugh Freeze is going to be one of the hotter seats in the SEC entering next season. I think they could go 7-5 this year, and his seat's not hot next year. Their over-under win total is 7.5. So that's where the FanDuel expectation is for Auburn. He's entering year 2 with a roster that was not SEC caliber when he got there. I'm just stating facts. Their entry point was pretty low. Relative to what you would expect an Auburn roster to be, it was really low. And I think most people know that. I think the fan base got that. They certainly got it. If they didn't know, they knew when they got there. They've recruited at a top 10 level. There's really good energy in the building there. They've got, and I can't stress this enough, they've got good minds behind the scenes. They got folks who understand how this thing works. I'm not saying it's a perfect operation. They've got their fair share of warts internally, just like anyone else does. They are equipping themselves to win long term. I actually have very little doubt about that. And so, again, I want to wrap this up by saying I love our buddy Michael Bratton. We'll probably see him at Media Days next month, and I will hug him just like I always do. But, man, we should talk about this. We should revisit this. I wish I had him in studio tonight. We should revisit this because that one floored me. I had Jesse play me the clip earlier today because one of you asked about it. Jesse, that was a 30-some-odd second clip. I think I had him pause it 5 times in 30 seconds. That's how much commentary that I had to give. So we said, why don't we just do this on the show? Lastly, before we actually talk about bold predictions, I do want to remind you, we mentioned the over-under win total 7.5 there. Well, I'm not just making that up. The win total's there at FanDuel. You can go bet it right now. You can go actually bet any of these over-unders, for that matter, at FanDuel. They're our exclusive odds provider here at Pate State, and we appreciate them for that, and they will continue to be that. And as we sort of push towards the season, of course, you got totals and lines up for Week 0 and Week 1, but the prop market will explode, and we'll have really, really good interaction with them this season. But in the meantime, whether you want to get some early futures wagering in, you just want to bet FSU minus 12.5 against Georgia Tech in Week 0 because the game's in Ireland and you can't let a game happen in Ireland without having 5 or 10 on it. I get it. Do it at FanDuel. If you don't have interest in betting, don't do it. Check them out anyway, though, because there's a lot of free information over there that's probably more guided than a lot of your local preview magazines are going to have to serve you. We're not anti-preview magazine. All right, here we go. I actually got a fairly big announcement here. Bold predictions are back. I have 3 bold predictions on the show tonight that are 9.5 or higher on the boldness scale. And you know the rule around here. If you make a prediction that's 9.5 higher on the boldness scale and it comes true, you get a chalice of supremacy. So there's a lot on the line in the next few minutes. Prediction number 1. This is from Arvada, Colorado. Shedeur Sanders or Travis Hunter will be in the running for the Heisman. One of them will win it. It wasn't going to be so bold until they said one of them will win it. Travis Hunter is currently tied for having the 25th best odds. Shedeur Sanders currently tied for having the 18th best odds. So they're in there, like they're in the picture. Only 4 non-quarterbacks since 2000 have won this thing, and only one of them was a wide receiver. That was Devontae Smith a few years ago. So you need like a full-on Charles Woodson type year from Shedeur Sanders. And you also need to win. The team has to win. Like Travis Hunter, I meant. Shedeur Sanders as well. Colorado's offensive line's got to be good enough to protect him. But either one of them, you got to have a winning team. Jesse told me this earlier today, and I would not have known this because I don't pay attention to the Heisman a lot. There's only been one instance since 1998 of a dude winning the Heisman on a team that had less than 9 wins. And I think that was the Ricky Williams year at Texas. So they've got to win. They got to win a lot more than they're expected to win this year. This is a 9.5 on the boldness scale to me. Next up, another 9.5 here. Take the teams that won their conferences. I think all these won a conference. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, they all won their conference last year. So from Powder Springs, Georgia, Grant said all 4 2023 playoff teams will fail to make the playoff in 2024. So Michigan, minus 105 odds to make it right now. Washington, plus 880. So they're a long shot. Bama, plus 124. Texas, minus 230. Clearly, Washington making the playoff would be a minor miracle this year. But the other 3 are in the top 10 odds to make it, to win the whole thing, actually. So the other 3 are expected to be right in the mix. And you're telling me none of them make it? Michigan, Texas, Bama, all top 10 playoff championship odds. You're telling me none of them make it? None of them? And also Texas and Michigan play each other this year in non-conference play. So think about week 2. Whichever team wins that, not only are they probably going to have a good year in conference, they'll have a massive out-of-conference feather in their cap. How is the winner of that game going to go on and miss the playoff? So anyway, this is a 9.5 on the boldness scale. I think 2 or more of these teams are going to be in. Wouldn't surprise me if 3 out of the 4 were in. That's a 9.5. Next up, We take a serious turn towards negative town here. And this comes from Ackworth, Georgia. Dante says LSU is going 6-6 or worse, which is news because their total right now is 9.5, over-under, win total 9.5. This millennium, LSU, 500 or worse finish. They've done it twice, and it was recently. It was both 2020 and 2021, I think. So it has happened. But I was just thinking along the lines of, like, what has to go wrong this year? And there is a scenario where things go really wrong. Maybe Garrett Nussmeier is just not the quarterback that you need him to be, and you're trying to replace Jaden Daniels. Maybe the running game, it never quite pans out the way you wanted it to. The offensive line is not the road grading unit that you thought it would be. Maybe major injury hits them. Defense doesn't take any kind of step forward. If those things were to happen, there's a world where LSU's that bad this year. But all that's got to happen, I think, for them to be that bad. And I just don't think that a Brian Kelly team's going to be that bad. So this is a 9 on the boldness scale for me. They also, Colin, could you show me their schedule right quick? They play an SEC schedule, but they don't play like the Florida version of an SEC schedule. So they've got USC to open the season. They're nearly a touchdown favorite against USC out in Las Vegas. They've got Bama at home. They don't play Texas in the regular season. They don't play Georgia in the regular season. They got Ole Miss at home. So got Oklahoma at home at the end of the year. I keep forgetting about that. 6-6, 5-7. That's a little bit too bold. I'm going to make it a 9. And lastly, this one's fun. This is a 9.5, but I'm going to tell you why. Jacob from Holland, Michigan said both teams from Iowa make their conference championship games. And my question is, how is Iowa going to make the Big Ten championship game? So Iowa State has the 5th best odds to win the Big 12. Iowa has the 6th best odds to win the Big Ten. Iowa State, as of today, I got no problem with this for obvious reasons. And if you're new to the show and it's not obvious, I love Iowa State. So there's your reason. They do have a top 10 team in returning production this year. I guess the bad news, if you want to call it that, is I told you they have the 5th best odds to win the conference. They play all 4 teams in front of them. They play Kansas State. They play Utah back-to-back, by the way, to end the year. So they play all the teams in front of them. They do play Iowa in week 2. These teams play each other. It won't matter because it's not a conference game. So I think Iowa State's got a fairly decent shot here to make it. Now, they don't have to win it, to make it. Iowa, it's such a major shift in the Big Ten this year with no divisions. Previously, they just had to win the West. Now they've got to legitimately be one of the 2 best teams in the conference, and they've got Ohio State, they got Michigan, they got Oregon out there. They have got to finish ahead of all but one of those teams. And I just flat out think that's going to be really difficult. And that's not even to say anything about how much progress needs to be made offensively. So that's a 9.5 on the boldness scale for me. What a show tonight. What a jam-packed show. Over 2,000 watching live. It's just the middle of June. The more casual-minded amongst us would call this the off-season. We don't believe in it around here. There's going to be a lot happening this week, I think, on the college football front. Recruiting is at a crescendo. So keep it locked. I will have you a Late Kick Extra podcast on Tuesday. We'll have a live show on Thursday at Late Kick Josh on all the social platforms. Make sure you're following that Instagram story. You never know what's coming in the Instagram story. For producer Jesse, for Direct Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great start to your week, and God bless.